Thank you for choosing us tonight for your evening. I'm Ryan Eisenberg. I'm the CEO here at the Children's Health Council. We're really excited. This is the third year we've done a team panel. So first, my appreciation to all of you for making time and presenting to this group, and also for all the work that you've done through this year in the Teen Leadership Collaborative. CHC has been in the community for 73 years. And we were founded on the belief that all kids and young people should have access to the services they need to thrive within their communities. And we try to live that mission forward. Our expertise is really mental health and learning, and we deliver that in a variety of ways, from free community resources to specialized direct care to young people, to comprehensive services like whole schools or ILP programs. We also lead community partners. We have a Leadership Collaborative, which is a collection of providers in the area that meets quarterly and talks about the needs of the community and coordinates around community care. And we have a Teen Leadership Collaborative that also meets regularly and does projects like hosting panels like this, doing a blog, a podcast that we have, and a variety of other things as well. But we appreciate everybody coming out and supporting this event. It's really a great opportunity to hear directly from youth and all the things that you're experiencing and your experiences in the system. It helps inform our care. Every year we walk away with ideas that we apply to our own programs. And for any of you that are out there doing work with young people, hopefully the same thing's true. And so without further ado, I'll pass it back to Natalie. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ryan. So Ryan talked a little bit about our services. The Teen Collaborative is run by our community engagement team. There's a flyer in the back with some of the free services that we offer. Here we mentioned the podcasts. We have parent support groups. We also have an online resource library, lots of free, great resources. So please check them out and share them. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about the organizations that are here represented today. So we have students from AIM, Alcove, Safe Space, and Tarika Foundation. But in addition to that, Bring Change to Divine and Child Success and My Digital Team 2 are a part of the Teen Collaborative also. So if there's other organizations that you would recommend being a part of this teen group, then let us know. We're looking to grow next year. And then we'll get started. So I'm going to just have everybody introduce themselves, maybe say your name, first name, your grade, and what organization you're affiliated with. And then also, as a fun kind of intro, what you do when you're stressed or anxious or depressed to make yourself feel better. So what's your comfort activity? I guess I'll share because otherwise it's not very fair. I'm a Gilmore Girls person, so I watch Gilmore Girls. It's my comfort activity.
Hi everyone, I'm Orly. I'm from Safe Space and I'm a senior in high school. And whenever I'm stressed, just anything music related really helps me regulate. So whether that's playing music, going to a concert, just listening, I love all things music.
Hi everyone, my name is Saisha and I'm from AIM. I'm a current junior in high school and my comfort activity would be anything outdoors. So I love hiking or walking with my dog or just kayaking. Literally like any outdoor adventure is what I love to do.
Hi everyone, my name is Sierra and I'm from Tarika Foundation. I'm in 10th grade, so I'm a sophomore, and my comfort activity is to go outside, go to the park, and play a sport. I play volleyball, so that's what I enjoy the most.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben. I'm also a senior. I'm in Peninsula High School, and I'm with Alcove. I would say my comfort activity is like going shopping or listening to music or playing tennis.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, I want to start with this question. I'm going to hold on to this mic so that it's not flying back and forth. So what does stress actually feel like for teens here right now? In a place with lots of achievement pressure, what weighs most heavily? And I guess it could be one thing. Academics, college pressure, family expectations, social comparison, politics, AI, or maybe it's something else or everything. Who wants to start?
Living in the Bay Area is definitely a very unique experience for anyone, but especially as someone who's actively growing up and going through the education system here. I would say the Bay Area is very unique in that there are a lot of opportunities here that a lot of other places around the U.S. do not have. And also what comes with that is a higher level of pressure in terms of achievement. So there are a lot of high expectations in terms of going to a 4-year college, becoming successful financially. And it can feel very overwhelming, you know, when you're like coming out of middle school and being told you kind of need to start focusing just on the future all the time, kind of like that's all that there is. And so I think with that culture in the Bay Area, it can cause a lot of mental health issues, especially in youth, because you know, you're supposed to be kind of exploring a lot of different things and trying to find yourself. And a lot of the time you feel like you don't have the luxury to do so because you have to focus on, you know, solely academic validation and getting into a top 20. And especially with AI revolutionizing now, you know, trying to find niches within that so that you will be successful in the future. So I think there are a lot of unknowns with that also lead to a lot of anxiety. But overall, a lot of opportunities here, and with that comes pressure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything Orly said. And I think I bring kind of a different perspective to this just because I am originally not from the Bay Area. Like, I grew up in Virginia on the East Coast, and I moved right before I started high school. So that pressure change was definitely something that I felt very clearly and was very unique to the Bay Area. Like Orly said, there are so many opportunities here. Like in my high school, I can say there's so many like opportunities to pursue your interests outside of school through clubs or like through internships or through opportunities. But there's just a lot of pressure from your family, from your peers. Like, because this is such a high achieving area, it's very easy to get wrapped up with what everyone else is doing and feel that pressure onto yourself. And for me, that's one of the biggest things that I felt has contributed to these mental health issues is like social comparison and just constantly feeling like whatever you're doing, it's not enough because you're seeing everyone else doing more than you. And even though that might not be the case, like we can't see into everyone's lives, but just that feeling of like not doing enough is what takes over our minds and constantly puts us in the cycle of like seeking validation through our test scores or our grades and trying to like bring that to ourselves to make us feel better. When in reality, like we're kind of just chasing this invisible standard that is really just a toxic cycle.
Yeah. And building off of what like Orly and Saisha were talking about, I like to think that the pressure comes from different layers in our life. So firstly, since we all live in Silicon Valley, it's like the biggest and greatest tech hub in the nation, and it's home to so many of these big tech companies. And since all of our or most of our parents are working in these big tech companies, we have that like implicit or subtle pressure that, oh, we must also go and work and make all these great amounts of money, have this successful life, go to a top university. And then that kind of leads into the second layer with academics, that you must be like the best, score the highest, you know, answer the question the fastest, and like have the deepest analysis. And then there's like the third layer, which I see, which is like the social and having to balance between being like the best in academics, but also having like a great social life and attending all these different events and the school dances. And it's kind of like this struggle that's never going to end. And then like the fourthly, I see the last layer that's added on from social media, which is adding this like constant comparison that we're always seeing someone else who's always doing something else better than what we are.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that was said so far, but I would just say just very hard to have all these different factors and just still to be able to optimize yourself. I mean, it's really not just like your grades anymore. It's also like your resume. It's your social life. It's like your online image. It's your extracurriculars. It's everything. It's also just like, it makes it so much harder being such a competitive area.
So a lot of teens can look fine from the outside. What are some of these mental health struggles get hidden? And can you also talk about why? So what are some signs that maybe peers notice before adults do?
I would say I think a lot of the mental health struggles get hidden behind like achievement. I feel like a lot of the students who seem like the most like put together are actually like struggling to find the most internally because they learn how to keep performing no matter how stressed they are. They're putting on like a fake image almost. I feel like through like volunteering at Alcove, I've realized that a lot of teens are like scared that asking for help will like change how people see them. I think they're like not as like great or like not as like talented or smart, especially in these high pressure environments that we live in. There's this fear that struggling means you're like falling behind. I also think that friends notice changes before like adults a lot of the times. Friends notice when someone suddenly isolates themselves, like stops responding, or just seems emotionally off. And I feel like a lot of the teens, they just communicate stress indirectly before they ever openly ask for help.
Yeah, I agree completely with what Ben said, that mental health struggles, they usually stem from a fear that we'd be judged, and like a way of seeing mental health struggles as a personal weakness, and seeing it as a weakness seems like if I try to ask for help, I'll go out and be vulnerable, and people will see that I'm not that perfect image that I have portrayed outside. And that's probably one of the reasons that I've seen why people don't ask for help. And then that's why we end up putting like a mask on top to cover it, so no one even sees that there is a little spot of weakness.
Yeah, I would say that one of the main ways I've seen mental health struggles get hidden is just like teenagers drowning themselves in more work because they're told kind of that the feeling is normal. So for context, like I'm a junior in high school, and so like everyone had told me when I was going in, like, oh, it'll be the worst year of high school, like it'll be a lot of work, like you're gonna be constantly stressed. So what I've noticed is that a lot of teenagers kind of feel like the stress and like the mental health burdens that they're feeling is just normal. So they don't ask for help because people tell them like, oh, you will be stressed, like it'll be normal and you'll get through it. When in reality, like those are times when you should seek help to like relieve the pressure a little bit, like spend time with people at the wellness center or like take breaks. I feel like there's just too much normalization around feeling stressed, like whatever year in high school it might be. And then I think like Ben said, like I've seen this with my friends too, but just teenagers, we kind of just interact in a way that like only we understand sometimes. Like when my friend stops texting me back sometimes and I don't really know what happened, like those are kind of small signs that I feel like we notice in our peers that adults don't. And those are some of the first signs that we can kind of support them in getting help.
Yeah, I think just in general, mental health in this area it's very nuanced almost because it's so normalized, because nearly every person struggles with it, yet there's so much stigma still that it's kind of just like an unsaid truth that has become kind of the norm nowadays. You know, I honestly can't really think of a friend that I have who hasn't confided in me some sort of challenge with their mental health along the last couple of years. So I just think, you know, that's what all of our organizations aim to do, is help destigmatize that. And I think, you know, by having youth say it to the youth, that's one of the most effective ways to destigmatize mental health.
I think that's really interesting. What you guys are talking about is that it almost sounds like mental health is trendy. Like it's almost. I think we talked about when we were planning the panel that kids will brag about the fact that they haven't slept in 48 hours, and it's just kind of like this new cool thing. I'm just wondering if anyone can talk about that a little bit more, and maybe some suggestions for the professionals in the room on like how to maybe combat that if it's at all possible. Sorry, that was an unscripted question.
Sure, I can talk on it. I think, yeah, there's a lot of what has been termed grind culture in the Bay Area. So it's almost like, you know, the less sleep you get, the more dedicated and hardworking, farther you'll go in your life. So it's almost kind of like the competition of who is struggling the most in a way, which I think creates a very, very unhealthy culture.
And not like the performing.
Right. It's like you are grinding and you're up tirelessly and you're telling all your friends how you have 12 extracurriculars and you're not going to get home till 10 p.m. and oh, you have this midterm, that, and it's almost like it becomes like almost like subtly competitive without even like directly people are trying to compete. It just forces you to have to like compete, and it's almost like zoo. It kind of feels like a circus in a way of like performing of, you know, how can I show that I'm working the hardest and I will go the farthest. So I think that culture is definitely like very unique to the Bay Area as well.
What makes it easier for a teen to ask help? What makes it harder?
or need to start?
Yeah, I can start. So I would say that some things that make it easier for teenagers in general to ask for help is feeling like when we ask, we're not going to be lectured. So I know that this is a big thing with maybe parents or grandparents, but definitely I can speak for me. When my parents grew up, it was a different time. And I think that the experiences are not the same. So obviously like the advices that they would give their younger self are probably not going to work for me. So it's, for me, like when I feel like I'm being lectured or like when I'm hearing about how like what everyone else is doing is like doing all these extracurriculars and like I'm not able to manage it, like those type of things definitely don't help in general for teenagers. Like I feel like having someone that can just sit and listen honestly and just like reassure you that you're not crazy for like wanting to sleep for 8 hours, and like you're not crazy for like being surrounded by people who are constantly telling you that you should be doing more. Just getting that reassurance is really helpful, and being able to confide in that person about what you're going through. For me, it's always been my school counselor. She's always like, whenever I've had an issue, she's sat down with me, and when I like go on my rants, like she just listens, and that's honestly so helpful for me. We don't always want someone to give us advice. Sometimes it's just helpful to just rant and just talk, and then if they like, it's really helpful when they ask if we want suggestions or if we don't, without just giving suggestions when we didn't ask for it. So I would say just being open and patient makes us feel really supported and feels like we can trust who we're talking to.
Yeah, and as Saisha was talking about having someone who can actually listen, I think the key there is that talking to someone who's trustworthy, because when people won't ask for help if they feel like the person they're asking is going to judge them. And usually the reason we don't ask for help is because we're scared of what others will think, or like the judgment that'll come from sharing something. And so someone who can just listen and be there is someone who's trustworthy and someone we know has our back, and no matter like what happened, they aren't gonna, like you mentioned, like lecture, but instead they're gonna be there to like reassure that it's gonna be okay and help us through it rather than judging.
And yeah, I would say also for me, just having someone at school that you can talk to is like really helpful for me. I mean, for me, my art teacher, I could always go to if I have any problem, if I have any issue or anything. She's someone I can rant to, and just talk to whenever I have a problem or I'm anxious or I'm stressed out about anything. I think just making these schools like give more options for students to like for them to go to places where they feel comfortable talking to an adult, or give them like a mix of opinions almost, because it's good to get someone who's older than you an opinion. It's also good to talk to your friends, but I think also talking to adults is also a good thing.
Yeah, and I think specifically relating to like what kind of language and energy makes kids more prone to shutting down and, just holding it within and not confiding in a trusted adult or friend is like when their problems are met with sort of like a toxic positivity or like comparison to like a parent's own past, because it kind of just makes like us feel like there's like a kind of standard of like resilience that someone has to have. And like if you're struggling, it's kind of like you're on the opposing end and kind of like underneath where your parents have like gone to, or where like if a friend is like, yeah, like I went through the exact same thing, but instead of like just listening, they're just like telling their own thing. It's like, okay, so like I need to just push through, like I just need to push through. And like I think that can often do more harm than good, even though it feels kind of like it would be a relatable thing. It just creates kind of an unhealthy comparison, because everyone copes differently and has their own way to kind of get through struggles. And I think that's something that people discover like during their formative years, how they respond to hindrances in life. And I think, by just setting like a lot of kind of standards by instead of just listening and being there, it can create almost like a failure sort of sense in the person who is trying to share their struggles.
And that's a good point. I think it's really hard as a parent to not knee-jerk, but when I was young, and tell the story and hopefully a way to try to relate and try to share wisdom. But I think no matter what, that kind of ends up coming off as you're not hearing what I'm saying and you're trying to compare experiences that times have changed significantly. And also your experience is your own experience, and going through that is also a process that they didn't necessarily go through. So I think that's a good reminder for the parents in the room. Can you talk about navigating friendships in high school? So different types of friendships at school, outside of school, and how they can impact mental health. We've touched on this a little bit, but we can go into a little more depth.
I can start. So I think first, like, it's good to remember that friendships come in like all different shapes and sizes, and so every friendship's gonna be different. And to like navigate, I think we have to first choose a friend. And to choose friendships, I think it's important to choose friends who are uplifting and encouraging rather than like putting you down. And then, like all relationships, friendships like have their up and downs, and there's gonna be disagreements, but in those times, like I like to remind myself that everyone at the end of the day has like their own perspective. So instead of thinking like their perspective is wrong, it's probably right from theirs, and that's probably what they think about me. So making sure that we're like handling it maturely and knowing that like there is a difference of opinion, but that doesn't mean that one person is right or wrong. And I feel like also when we label it as a conflict, then we're saying that it's me versus them and like we're two opponents, versus thinking like we're friends and we can actually solve the problems. And another thing, like in long-term wise, I think in friendships, it's important to remain consistent and not just going to a friend and asking and talking with them when you have like a big test or you need something, but always consistently like being there, talking with them every day. I think that's what really builds and takes friendships to the next level. And so like for me, that means like hanging out with my friends during lunch and break time and just spending like time with each other. That's really what builds the connection. And then on like the other part on the different types of friendships at school and even outside this applies, I think there's healthy and unhealthy. So healthy friendships, as I mentioned, are the ones that empower and uplift us, and those increase the feelings of belonging and inclusion. And then there's also, on the other hand, like the unhealthy relationships, and that's kind of where someone's using you to like excel or be better in like a certain activity or get a certain outcome, rather than like an equal 50-50 relationship.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely very difficult navigating friendships in high school. You definitely have to like balance, like everything that's going on in your life and make sure you're not talking about like your classes too much. Because I think if you just talk about the academics, then she turns into like you're just competing against your friends, and not a healthy relationship. I think you need to establish things that are not just all about like homework or APs or tests or test scores or whatever it is. I think you need to establish like these to talk about it's not related to school, almost just to take your mind off it for a little bit. But I think, yeah, everyone just needs to just surround yourself with like people that like can be supportive and like understand and listen to you.
Yeah, I would say for me, it was honestly pretty difficult to find a friend group full of people that in some form didn't feel like I was their competitor. Like, it was like, even the small things, like how many APs are you taking this year? Like, those are things that I really don't want to talk about in a friendship when that's all I hear from like every other person in all my classes. But apart from that, I would say that it's for any student, like it's really important to remember that like friendships will change, like as you go through middle school and high school. Like for me, because I moved, like I already had to start new, but even for people I know that have grown up in the Bay Area, like your friendships will change, and that doesn't mean that you did anything wrong or that the other person did anything wrong. Sometimes it's just like a natural way, like it just happens sometimes. But like Surat said, like the connection and the constant like reaching out and like putting that effort in can always help strengthen the bonds. But I wouldn't like drive yourself crazy if like suddenly you grow apart from someone, because that's just honestly like you're beating yourself up over like something that could have happened to them and you just don't know about it. Like that happened in my personal life recently. Like there was a situation where like someone drifted apart and I wasn't really sure what happened, but at the same time, like it's not healthy for me to kind of beat myself over like what did I do wrong or like what could I have done different, because it's just not like a healthy use of like my time and my energy. So just remember that like friendships will change, and just put effort into people who you believe like will support you and stay by you, but don't like attach yourself to a certain friendship, so that like just be confident in your self-worth and don't like put that into someone else.
Yeah, I think like everyone pretty much summed it up, that there is definitely a mix of the kind of people you will meet in this area. And many of those people are very great people who, you know, are your anchor friends and like truly know who you are as a person and are interested in that. And then there's definitely a big population of people who just, you know, see you as like kind of something to cling to for like a social status, to not, you know, just to be like, yes, I have friends. And, you know, they see you as kind of just competition and not super like, they're not very interested to get to know you almost, because this area has instilled in them that they need to just keep climbing and climbing. And they feel like, you know, they don't maybe want to make friends because they feel that will get in the way, or, you know, it's just been drilled into them that there's not time for that. So I think, you know, growing up in this area, being able to discern the difference is very important, because if you, you know, view someone as like a true friend, but they're kind of caught up in this really toxic system, it's hard and it can be very tolling to try to stay friends with them, because, you know, it just feels like watering a dead plant because like you're not getting what you need. So I think just being in this area, a lot of people here have been able to really grow a sense of like who's real and who just doesn't want or have the time to invest in a friendship. But yeah, I think that's very unique to this area. It's challenging too, especially growing up.
Yeah, I have another off-script question, so I apologize. I think you all talked about how finding authentic relationships and friendships is challenging because of all the academic pressure, and those conversations kind of supersede real connection with people. I'm wondering, how do you check yourself in those moments with friendships, like to not talk about APs or to not talk about academic stuff? Like, how do you kind of manage that? And then also thinking about, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, let's just start there and then I'll add on.
Yeah, I think it's important to ask yourself a question, just like in any social setting, of like, is what I'm about to say right now gonna, like, how will it affect other people? And just kind of like be like having a level of awareness of like where everyone is kind of at. Like, is this friend dealing with like something very difficult at home? Is this friend, you know, struggling a lot in school and has a big midterm tomorrow? Like, do I want to bring it up right now while we're having some quality time on a hangout or something? So I think just like, you know, being able to develop an awareness of like a time and place, because I think there always is a time and place. Like, if you just came out of a horrible test and you're like, man, that was rough, like, you don't need to keep talking about it a week later when you're trying to just decompress and just be. So I think, you know, just knowing when and where it's acceptable to bring up academics.
I remember the second part of my question, which was, how do you remind yourself also to like take kid moments, if that makes sense, like to not be in a very pressured state? So how do you force yourself to take breaks and to take time for yourself when you feel like everyone around you isn't doing that? So go ahead.
Yeah, I can start. So first of all, I feel like, at least for me, it starts with just getting out of school. Like, I don't think that my friend group in particular, can like stay in our school, because we always see people we know, and it somehow goes back to like, how was the math test, or how was the chem test, or like, what did you get on this test? So we try to get out of school as much as possible, and we try to go outside. And like, what me and my friends do a lot, which has helped, is like, we leave our phones like either at someone's house, and we just like go out, and someone just has to like watch or something to keep in contact with parents. And we literally just like tell ourselves that we're not going to talk about the test, and we're not going to talk about like grades or anything like that. And we're literally just going to go out and like go for a bike ride, or like go for a walk, or do something like completely in nature. Like, I really like doing that, and my friend group does too. So that really helps us. Like, literally, we cannot use our devices. Like, we're not checking our grades or anything. So yeah, I feel like I'm also really lucky to have found friends that kind of have that mindset too, because I know that a lot of teenagers are very like clingy to them, like phones and like social media. But I think it's just like setting boundaries and like talking with your friends about like what will help you in particular and like what you guys want to follow to just have some quality time and just like forget about school and just release some stress.
Yeah, I think for me, it starts with choosing friends who are like so obsessed with like the test scores. Like for me, I have a bunch of friends who we have interests in a bunch of activities that wouldn't quite relate to academics. Like some of my friends are really into F1, others into like sports we play together. So I think for me, when I found friends that are interested in other things besides tests, then all of our conversations wouldn't automatically just go into our test scores. And I think like they've mentioned before me, that after tests, I noticed a lot last year, the conversation, you walk out of the room and everyone's like, what'd you do? How did you do? How was the test? Was it easy? Was it hard? What'd you get on this question? And I think what me and some of my friends have done is we've just like left and walked out and then left and gone to different rooms. And we don't talk about the test after that. And I think that's something that helped me, especially if you like do not great on a test and then you walk out and everyone's talking about an answer that you didn't get right. I feel like that's not a great feeling. So even if I got the question or got it right or got it wrong, I just leave. So I don't know.
Yeah, I would say just like making sure like that you're just like doing things, if you're talking about things other than like school, you know. I think like getting yourself involved in like clubs and extracurriculars is really important, and making sure you're not just like signing yourself up for like 10 APs or whatever, and make sure you're doing other things besides that. Just making sure that you can talk to people about things that you relate to or things that like make you happy.
Thank you. Okay, next question is on social media. So how is social media affecting teen mental health right now? What parts make stress, anxiety, or loneliness worse, and what parts actually help teens feel connected and supported?
One thing I found like through like I did a lot of research on social media use and anxiety is that social media itself isn't automatically like good or bad. Depends a lot on how it's being used and how much of your identity like becomes tied to it. I think the hardest part for teens right now is the constant comparison on social media and the feeling of always being like on or like seen and like almost like watched and judged. Like even when you're alone, like you still feel connected to everyone else's like lives, opinions, achievements, and social plans. That's like their social media. There's not much mental downtime anymore for people really. At the same time, social media I feel like can genuinely like help people who feel isolated. Like for example, in my school there's a lot of LGBTQ teens, which are prone to struggle with mental health, and I feel like that's a good like going online is a good place to find that community and people who feel misunderstood in their local environment. I feel like you can create a community and support that they might not otherwise have at their school. I think adults sometimes like misunderstand that social media isn't just like separate from our real lives. And I feel like for a lot of teens, it is our social environment, and like just telling them to just like log off. And I feel like it's a lot more like harder than it seems, but more complicated because it's very deeply involved in our everyday lives.
Just say that's helping, not helping, or just is.
It's very complicated.
Yeah, so it just is.
Yeah, I think social media, like, yes, it does like sometimes help people feel connected and supported, especially during COVID. I know that social media was something that kept people still together, but I think that now, since we're out of COVID, there's a lot more of like the negative aspects to it than positive. For example, like social media has like definitely increased the pressure to fit in, and that's in like the way we look, the way we act, and preferences too. And sometimes through social media, we end up like trying to change ourselves just to fit in with others, so that we feel like we belong. And also with social media, that's kind of fueling our need of validation, and like all these accounts where we make accounts and we post our stories and I feel like all the number of likes we have, the number of followers, it kind of shows us where we stand on like a hierarchy. Like, are we that popular or do people really like us? And I feel like our account status is kind of our social status, which should not be. Another thing is that now with social media, there's all these apps where you share your location, and sometimes you can see where your friends are versus where you are, and that can lead to FOMO, like, oh, everyone is at this one party and I'm not. Everyone was invited to this one event and I wasn't. And so these apps where we're like sharing our location can really, really make the FOMO worse. And another thing is a constant comparison. People on social media, like, they always post their like one best day, whereas we end up like comparing our like worst bad days to everyone else's good days, thinking that that one good day is like their everyday when it's not. So I think we just need to remember that.
Yeah, I just want to anchor on to the last thing that Shrad said, which is just like be one perfect day. Like, in my opinion, the biggest problem that social media has created is like putting up this perfect image of everyone when that's really not the case. Like, everyone goes through good and bad days, and social media really only projects the good parts, which then makes like an unrealistic standard for everyone else seeing those things, because then you feel like, oh, well, this person's living such a good life. Like, they're so accomplished, they're so happy, they have so many friends. Like, I have to do that too. When that person definitely goes through their days too, but they're just not projecting that on like Instagram or like on Snapchat. So it just makes teens feel like this, they have to live this unrealistic life, which, like, you're a teenager, like, you're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna be moody, you're gonna have bad days, like, it's just how you're gonna be. So just seeing that, like, unrealistic expectation all the time on social media just creates, like, a really toxic cycle.
Yeah, I think just like the inability to ever truly log off in this day and age is like so tolling, because oh my gosh, social media is exhausting. And also just like, I guess from kind of a different lens than that has been talked about yet, you know, looking at news, everything is posted online and most of it is extremely polarized, extremism, you know, the worst, most charged possible thing you could see. You know, there's a lot of misinformation nowadays, and, you know, by virtually most people being online now, but especially the youth growing up in a time where, you know, you don't really know what you're seeing. Like, is it real? Is it fake? Is this credible? And I think, you know, if you are someone who wants to actually know what's happening and you take the time to research once you see something, that is great. But I also know that most people in my age group do not do that. So that creates a lot of, you know, misleading information and hate nowadays. I've faced just a lot in different areas. And I think that social media is kind of a new front of wars, and that can cause extreme discomfort, you know, especially in school settings.
This question is kind of related. So now that California schools have adopted policies on limiting or prohibiting smartphone use in schools next year, do you think phone restrictions during school will help teen mental health, hurt, or both? I just say you should start on this question because you talked about not using your phone with your friends. So.
Oh, yeah. So I think say, like, to start with, that, like, removing phones will definitely improve the in-person connections made. Like, something that I noticed is because in high school, like, we have classes that are shuffled, so, like, our friend group is not going to be in every class with us. So, like, there's going to be instances where it's really helpful to make new friends and, like, have that group of friends in each class, like, throughout the year, and you can, like, talk with them. Like, if you ever miss a day of class, you can text them, and just having that community is really helpful. And something that phones have removed is, like, whenever someone doesn't know someone in the class, they just turn to their phone and, like, start playing a game or start scrolling on social media, when you could easily just talk to the person next to you and, like, make that connection. So if we remove phones, like, I think that will definitely help build those connections and just help people, like, instead of scrolling in your free time, like, just have a conversation with the person next to you and, like, build that connection. I think that's something that will be one of the biggest benefits. And then I would say that phones could feel a little bit restrictive, like, taking the access away, because for me, like just from an academic standpoint, I know that I use like Google Calendar and my phone a lot to keep track of tasks and stuff. And like they removed our personal account access on our school laptop. So like that's something I can't access anymore on my school laptop. So like every time I get an assignment, I write it down on my calendar. And if I can't use my phone, then I might start forgetting assignments, things like that. And that could potentially be stressful for a lot of students. So I can see how like it could be used for an academic sense. And I understand like that need to like have the ability to like do certain things on your phones. So for me, like my school has this right now and I'm hoping they'll continue, which is like we put our phones away during class, but during breaks and during lunch, we're allowed to have them. And then when we start class again, it just goes into like a phone cubby. And I found that that's pretty helpful in terms of like, we've only had it for 1 year. So for the short term, like I've seen good benefits. So I'm excited to see like what all California districts do.
I really agree with what Saksha was talking about. I think that when we don't have access to them, then there's can definitely be a lot more connection that happens between people. Because usually when we're on our phones, for probably doom scrolling, then we aren't really like aware and looking and seeing who's next to us and actually having a conversation. But it's those conversations that would like bring a friendship forward and increase connection. And that also would reduce mental health struggles, and especially feeling like a lack of connection, that would really help. And like academic wise, I do think that not having phones like during class would help. Our school has been implementing a policy where we can't use phones during the school day. After that, we can. And so they've been trying to implement this by taking phones away during the school day, which sometimes like it's working, but students have been like finding their way to get around it. So I'm waiting to see how this California like state law would change something in our school.
Yeah, I would say it definitely could help in some ways and also hurt in a lot of other ways. I feel like phones definitely obviously make it harder to focus and it can be easier to disconnect from like reality and people physically. But I also feel like phones can be like a real support system for a lot of people. Like I know a lot of people in my school use their phones to play music, to regulate their anxiety, or like some people like need contact with like their parents or therapists, and I feel like their phones and sometimes how they really stay connected socially throughout the day. And I think honestly more balanced policy makes the most sense, and it's like again like restrict the phones during class time to help the focus, but also like allow students to like access them during like breaks and lunch.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a lot of positives, but also in a way, by restricting the phones, it's creating kind of a slope for the students to go out into the real world and not know how to control themselves. Because I think an important lesson that I've had to deal with in high school, because the phone restrictions have really only been implemented this year, is, you know, how to restrain myself and not be urged to pick up my phone every time I see a notification when I need to be working on an essay or a project. And I think, you know, by the schools very, very, you know, closely restricting that, it sets up a lot of people to, you know, once they are given full access when they go off to college or go to a job, they won't be able to control themselves because they've never had to on their own. So I think it kind of poses an interesting effect there. And I also think like definitely, you know, that will be reflected in grades, because you're not like most teachers, no matter what, even before the phone like restrictions were implemented, have been like collecting the phones for exams. So I think, you know, if you're distracted and on your phone and are not controlling yourself, and then you take an exam and you don't have your phone and you get a bad grade, like you learn pretty quickly, okay, I need to start setting some boundaries within myself and learn how to control myself. And I think that's very important, especially in an age where, you know, just devices are so widely used. So how to use them efficiently.
Thanks, everybody. So switching gears a little bit back to how we kind of see unseen people who are having mental health challenges. Can we talk a little bit about which teens in this area are more likely to be struggling without people noticing? Who gets overlooked when school and communities talk about mental health?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think the students that are or the teens that are most likely to be struggling are students who seem like they're perfect and they're handling everything at once, because it's most likely that they're like at the verge and they're not quite able to handle everything at once. And on the outside, it looks like the students who always like submit their homework on time, they always score the A's, and they do all these different extracurriculars. And I've also come across this book called Doing School, How We're Creating a Generation of Stressed Out, Materialistic, and Miseducated Students by Dr. Denise Pope from Stanford. And in this book, she actually follows the lives of 5 different top best students in this high school. And these 5 students were voted upon like as the best students in their board and like from the teachers. And as she goes through this book, she uncovers that these students, it looks like they're able to get everything done on time, but they're actually multitasking during class, juggling so much, pulling so many all-nighters, and they end up sacrificing their like physical and social life just to get these like academic grades. And so to sum it up, I think that the teens who seem like they have everything sorted out are the ones who are actually struggling the most.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that was said so far. Like, I also think that in my area specifically, like, it's the high achieving students that people often overestimate because they're like, oh, they're fine, you know, like they're doing so much, they're not complaining. But the not complaining a lot of the time comes from the stigma of like, oh, like people, especially because people think of me as like this like role model and like I do everything. So like if I like ask for help, then like, what are people gonna think of me now? Like, I'm not gonna have that same social image. So just that fear of like breaking this like perfect perception that everyone has of you can stand as a big barrier. And like people will really notice your struggles because you feel pressured to keep up that image. So that's like similar to what Siran said, that's one of the biggest barriers.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I've assumed many leadership roles at my school. And like, I think it's a rarity for a teacher to really like check in or like ask me how I'm doing, just like in general. Whereas like, you know, there's a student in my English class who consistently comes in late, falls asleep in class, you know, a lot more like, he's a lot more visually struggling, you know, than like, you know, if I'm having a very rough day or I'm very tired, I tend to just kind of mask it and try to stay astute, I guess. So I think just like something that's important for educators and even just anyone who works with youth in general to know is that like anyone can be having internal battles and everyone looks differently when they are dealing with that. So I think there's no real way to know who is really struggling, and that's part of the challenge. So just, you know, being open and posing as a support system and being ready to just receive any information from a student or, you know, coworker who, you know, wants to confide in you. I think that's just important.
Do you have anything to add? This is the last question, and then I'll open it up for questions from the audience. If you could change one thing in Bay Area schools, families, or the community to improve teen mental health this year, what would it be?
So if I could change one thing, I think there would be several things actually, but the first one, it's pretty simple, but it's honestly like just normalizing conversations between like counselors and teachers and students. Like Orly said, like it is pretty rare in my school too for a teacher to check in on almost anyone actually, just because my school recently went through like budget cuts, so a lot of new teachers got hired and they're already juggling so much, and the counselors have like, I don't know, like hundreds of students each, and especially during like scheduling and writing recs, like it gets a lot for them, and there's clearly not enough support, especially in my district after the budget cuts. A lot of like our wellness center resources also got cut, so that definitely doesn't help with like the stigma already, and then like cutting out these resources when they need to definitely paints a picture of how much like they prioritize mental health and how many students seek these resources. That kind of ties into the second thing, which is just creating more accessible spaces. My school, like I said, has a wellness center, but there's also a time limit for how long we're allowed to spend there.
And for me, like one time I came from a building all the way on the other side of campus and it took me like 5 minutes to walk and the time limit is like 10 minutes. So like definitely the like little things like that, like expanding those and having our administrators more understanding of like the fact that like we need a little bit more than 10 minutes to like actually relieve some stress and like make a difference. And then again, like increasing support at schools, like I can speak for my counselors, like they're already so overwhelmed and like I understand like how they feel because it's like difficult for them to also make that time to check in with each student that they think might be struggling and like make that time. So definitely like adding more resources and making more specialized support like for mental health specifically and for these check-ins would be really, really helpful.
My suggestion also goes to schools. I think that it would be beneficial for schools to talk more about mental health openly in classes and advisories. So this would include like social emotional learning, like emotional literacy, and also like how to ground ourselves when we're feeling stressed. I think that's like a big thing that sometimes gets overlooked in advisories. And also, as we've touched upon earlier, destigmatizing asking for help. And sometimes like we don't ask for help because it seems like it's a weakness if we do. And so we can use programs like advisory that are already built into our school day to reverse this narrative. And I think that would make a huge difference.
Yeah, I agree with everything's been said so far, but I think just like making these conversations like a lot more common, a lot more frequent, I would say, and make them a lot less like crisis based. Like instead of just like talking to someone like right as like something like you're in a crisis, you know, like talking to people more regularly, talking to someone like every week, or just talk to someone like more frequent. Because I think it should be normalized just talking to people before it can turn into a really bad crisis.
Thank you all. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I have a slide on it. But since most of you mentioned parents, educators not necessarily knowing how to handle mental health challenges or being overwhelmed, CHC just did launch a tool called Ellis, and it's a tool specifically for educators to help manage mental health challenges and learning issues in the classroom. So we want to share that with them. There's flyers in the back on that, and also people in the room. But I'll now open it up for questions. I'll say like speak loudly, and then I'll try to repeat it for the recording if anybody has any questions. Go ahead.
Thank you all, first and foremost, for doing this panel, because you guys give us an insight, right, that we don't always have. So I'm just really grateful to be learning from you and hearing your experiences. My question to you, I want to touch base back onto a question that was asked about which populations you guys feel are the most overlooked when it comes to mental health and mental care. I want to hear your thoughts on a specific group, which is the younger kids, the middle schoolers, the elementary schoolers, right? We've seen over the years, of course, this world has gotten probably the most complex it's been in the last 100 years, right now in this moment, and we're seeing how that's affecting, right? We can see statistics about how that's affecting younger kids. So, I guess my question is, what experiences can you share, or do you have any recommendations for how we can help start to navigate this conversation and some of these tools with the younger groups?
So the question is about younger populations, middle school, elementary school, and what trends we're seeing in their mental health challenges and what you would recommend from your own experience to professionals and parents in the room.
Well, in my experience, I would say I definitely had a hard time because I moved here in fourth grade. So I was like a transfer student. I moved to elementary school, and people weren't very welcoming here, I won't lie, and they weren't very accepting. So I would say just having people just kind of watch the classrooms to see how everyone's kind of if they're being included or not, having people monitor that, and having someone to talk to, because a lot of these kids you can't really tell with it. You have to talk to them really, and a lot of people, I think they get overlooked a lot, and I feel like there could just be more people someone, a counselor or someone for them to talk to. I wish I had someone to talk to, because I really didn't have anyone when I transferred here. But yeah, I think just having more support for the kids and just not overlooking them and listening to them really.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, even just from when I was in elementary school to now, there's been a big change. Like, in terms of like device usage, like the extent of like my use of it was like playing Roblox, and probably that's it. And nowadays, like, you're seeing children, sometimes even younger than elementary school, who are like on social media platforms consuming whatever's out there. And I think, you know, when children, especially that young, are witnessing, you know, the very weird world of the internet that young, it can, you know, create a lot of, you know, signs of like red flag behaviors, just of them kind of trying to replicate what they see online, things like that, you know, what their friend who saw something is talking about. So I think it's kind of a scarier time just because it's very, like, a lot of things are unregulated, and, you know, it's kind of just an inevitability of being, especially in this area, that most children are very exposed to technology and figure out how to use it pretty quickly because, you know, they're being raised with it. So I think, you know, especially in schools, just kind of making sure to listen in on what's being said, what's being talked about in the classroom, just kid to kid, because I think, especially, you know, elementary, middle school, people tend to just talk about like what they see online, pop culture stuff, and a lot of it can be very, very, you know, damaging to see, especially at any age, but especially young. So I think just being aware that there's a lot of things that are available for them to consume that honestly no one should.
Anybody else have anything, Adam? Right here.
I'm curious if you can speak to like any initiatives or programs or just like, I don't even know, like habits that your schools have done to help take some of the pressure off. Especially, I'm curious about this, what you all spoke about, like the competition amongst friend groups or amongst your peers. Have you seen anything, and it doesn't even have to be a school initiated thing, but just like anything help you or your friend group like not feel so competitive with each other or just take a chill pill?
So question is, I'm stuck on chill pills. Any school initiatives or maybe nonprofit initiatives or any programs that have been implemented at your schools or within your friend group that had helped kind of take the pressure off of performance?
I can start. One thing that our school did is that during our 2 weeks of AP testing, they actually stopped all classes. So instead we had what we call intersession at our school. And so we had like a whole school bonding, and it was like 2 weeks, and it was like a whole program, and that really helped take off like the pressure of academics and school with AP. So all we really had were just APs. That's something like our school has done. And also like not from school, I'm part of Tarika Foundation, and so along with that, we do really help instill in young children like mindfulness practices. And that's not like a program, but I feel like that's something that can be used on the go any minute when we need something to ground ourselves in times when we're feeling really anxious or stressed. Those are like the tools that I look back to.
Yeah, I would say one of the best people like in a classroom that can help mitigate this culture is teachers, because they're always around students having these conversations. And I can speak for AIM, but something that AIM has done recently is like starting to implement trainings for teachers to be able to recognize when these conversations are happening in a classroom and how to kind of step in and like mitigate the impact that it could have on someone's mental health, or like steer the subject away from academics and, I don't know, like get into a fun project or like what they are doing over the weekend or things like that. So I would say those trainings are really helping like teachers understand when they should step in and like how they can step in and exactly what to say. Because obviously like teachers probably don't speak the language of teenagers, but like they can try to like adapt and find ways to get involved in those conversations, since they're the ones that are constantly in the room where a lot of those talks happen. So that's one thing that I've seen in doing a lot of different districts.
Yeah, actually kind of similar with Safe Space. We have a variety of specifically catered workshops, like depending on what audience we're trying to reach. So we have like how to help your friend in need, how to help your student in need from a teacher perspective, how to help your child in need from a parent perspective. And I think that just kind of having events and informational sessions to kind of show people like, this is something that you should maybe listen to, because there are better ways to approach things than you may think. Because I feel like, again, like we were talking about in the beginning, the times are very different now. So, you know, advice and support that may have helped maybe even just 5-10 years ago is ineffective today. So by keeping up with, you know, relevant research and trends and information that's being put out there by such wonderful organizations like we're all, that is a very great way to kind of stay in the loop and help people just remember how to see people as people instead of just like metrics and GPA and all of that, because it really does consume, like in this area, both the family and the kid, the teachers. Like I have a lot of teachers that, you know, really want to know like where you're going to college, and will ask the whole class. And obviously some people are very proud and excited about college, but others may have not had a great experience or taking an alternative pathway, which I feel like is not talked about enough in this area, that there's so much more you can do than just college. So I just think, you know, staying aware of how things can come across, because I know that there's a lot of curiosity around like how people are doing academically and where they're going to college, but just being aware that not everyone has the same feelings around it.
I think we have time for one more question. There you go.
Thanks. So I really appreciate how, I think you had mentioned how like the conversations in the classroom or like the trainings and workshops that are being provided to all, like not being so focused on crisis, because it's totally what I do. Like just finished doing a whole bunch of suicide prevention workshops today in the middle school in Daly City. So like my question to you is like, what would those topics look like if we were to bring something in your classroom to normalize a conversation around mental health? Because that's what it sounds like we want to do, is normalize a conversation, and also like define that what mental health is. Because what I hear is like bad and poor mental health, right? Like mental health is health, it's healthy. But what I'm hearing is that we're using mental health in a way where it's like not healthy, right? And so how can we like distinguish those differences? What kind of topics can we have in the classroom on a weekly, right, where we can start having those conversations? Like, what would that look like? If I were to, you know, wave a magic wand and have these topics, like, what would that look like, or what would that be for you all?
It's a great question, because actually it was one of the ones we cut from. So first of all, define what mental health means to you is the first part of the question, and then the second part is, since so many programs are crisis management, what does it look like to have a program potentially or topics that would be covered that are not crisis level around mental health?
Yeah, I would define, you know, like mental health, just really just how you feel, and like how you like mentally feel about yourself, and like just like how what your mood is, and like how you're doing really. And then like to like speak on the conversations in the classrooms. I would say introducing it at like a younger age. I feel like we don't really talk about mental health until like really high school, really. I feel like making it more normal and like treating it more like a sickness, like, you know, like mental health and like physical health, they go hand in hand. Like they're like very similar, and everyone struggles. So I think just normalizing it and making sure that everyone knows the difference of mental health, and like that everyone struggles with it. And just like really like educating people on like at a younger age and making it more normalized.
Yeah, I think we define physical health as like how fit are you physically and like how strong are you. And so I think like if we apply the same analogy to mental health, it's like how resilient are you, how flexible are you, and how much can you like how much like emotional literacy do you have. So that's how I would define mental health. And in classrooms, like Ben mentioned, I think it's necessary that we start talking and teaching into this starting elementary school. Our school did start in middle school, but I don't think it wasn't like implemented great in a way that we were all able to like take in the information. So I think starting from like a younger age, and there's so many different like card games that speakers and these great like professors have made for
like emotional literacy and these different like games they make to like identify emotions. And there's like kimochi. So I think starting off and teaching children in a fun way through games that in ways that they will enjoy learning about their emotions, so that when they're going through it older, they're not thinking like, oh, this is like a taboo thing, but this is like something that's just as important as my physical health, so that they keep that ingrained as they go older.
Yeah, I think similar to what's been said, like mental health really wasn't a thing for me until high school, like especially after I moved. Because when after I moved, like I was expecting it to be hard, obviously, because I didn't know anyone here and I had to start fresh. But I felt very like isolated emotionally, like all the time. So for me, like kind of tying back into how I would define mental health is just like, how do you feel emotionally? Like Sarah said, like physical health was always a thing for me. Like you go to the doctor, right, for a well checkup, and it's like, oh, like, are you doing well? Like, I don't know, like blood pressure, whatever, heart rate. But just like emotionally checking in on yourself and seeing like how do I feel when I wake up in the morning? Like, do I feel like supported? And like, am I excited to like go to school today? And like, just like, what is bothering me today in my mind? Just that feeling of like how I'm doing emotionally is what I've come to tie to mental health. And then one of the best ways, like everyone has been saying, to like mitigate the stigma is just to like make mental health something normal since like elementary school, honestly. Like put it in the curriculum, like bring in more like social emotional like well-being curriculum into what like you're feeding kids since they're very young, so that like it's not something that hits you in high school. Like it stays with you continuously, and then I think that'll help honestly reduce a lot of the stigma around it, because it's like not something that people are getting hit with and like nobody's talking about. If we can bring it in when like kids are young, it's always going to be with them. It's something that they prioritize.
I think it's also I just want to point out that's beyond SEL curriculum, because I think that there's SEL curriculum that's really like a hot thing to do in schools right now, even in elementary school, but mental health is a full step beyond that.
Yeah, I think like mental health encapsulates a lot of different areas within, because there's, physical health, spiritual health, social health, just a lot of different, factors that just make up who you are that at any time can derail your mental health. So I think just kind of taking it into account from a well-rounded perspective, just where are you at in your life and like how do you feel about each area, that kind of determines how you feel mentally. And I think in schools, definitely since the pandemic, there's been like an increase in mental health being talked about and more commonly, but also because so many people like are struggling now, it's kind of also left unsaid because it's like a common thing. That's why there's weird nuance there of like, everyone kind of has had to run in with bad mental health, yet not everyone talks about it. So I think just as an educator, implementing, like a lot of teachers do like daily check-ins and things with their table group or things like that, which can seem like superficial or just to do it for the sake, but like honestly, it really helps set kind of a more like welcoming vibe in the like classroom. And I think it's very just like simple and effective. So just, it doesn't always have to be a super formal like presentation on this is mental health. It could just be like, implemented as small check-ins or games or Kahoots or anything.
I have one final question for all of you. This is kind of like your last chance. Question for survivor. What's one message you want everyone in the room, parents, team, experts in this space to walk away with and remember tonight? So this is kind of your final statement. Sorry, no pressure.
I think the main takeaway for everyone should be that there are many unknowns in this day and age, and because of that, health in general and especially mental health are very kind of easily affected. And there's a lot of just instability in the world, and so that rubs off on people. So just kind of being careful with when and where you're talking about what, I think, is the takeaway. Because you never know what someone is dealing with outside of the conversation you're having with them.
Yeah, going off of what Orly said about things like constantly changing, I would say that teenagers in general, and I think everyone honestly is living in a very unstable world. Like things change without notice, and like we're constantly going through changes, and people are always going to be stressed and like feel that pressure on them. And that's why it's so important for everyone honestly to find a way to manage the pressure and like maintain their mental health no matter what they're going through. So finding those resources and helping people kind of find the support they need will, especially now, like in today's world, is going to be one of the most important things to focus on. So mental health in general just needs to be brought to the forefront, and people need to realize that like with the constant amount of stress that'll come with these changes, like we need to just find ways and find people to confide in and be that support system for someone else, and just in general like maintain like a healthy form of coping and just, I don't know, staying with the changes that are happening.
Yeah, I think a key point from today's session is that like the importance of mental health and like the importance of destigmatizing it. Right now, it's like such a taboo to even talk about it, and I feel like we need to be able to destigmatize and talk about it and bring it to the forefront and not be afraid to ask for help. And that's what it would look like for us youth. But as we just talked about in the previous question, I think that also begins with now the younger children and teaching them from a young age through these fun activities that mental health is just as important as your physical.
Yeah, I would just say mental health is just so important. And just like how like kids just get like random colds, and just like it's the same for mental health, like we all struggle at different times, and it can be random. It can be at any point of your life, and it can last a week, or it can last a month, or it can last a year. You never know. That's why you need to really listen to children and listen to teens and young adults about their problems, and make sure that they're getting that help that you need. And just really just like making sure that everyone is heard.
Well, thank you all for coming today. I just want to acknowledge that they all have planned this and all the questions. We met like 3 times. So I appreciate you all for being so involved in this process, and not just like showing up and answering questions, but being involved in how it looked and how it felt. So thanks, everybody.